It's Roy Cannaday from Epic Gaming Night.
And Mark from Board Game Corner.
And today we're taking a look at Tiny Epic Quest.
Tiny Epic goodness.
Tiny Epic Quest is a 1 to 4 player adventure game set in a fantasy world. Each player will take one of the 4 player colors and then place their 3 meeples onto their castle. Players are trying to have the most points at the end of 5 rounds. There are 4 different ways to gain points: by upgrading your spellbooks, by completing quests, by defeating goblins, or by unlocking your legendary items. Each round starts with the day phase, where the first player will select a movement card and perform that movement card with one of their meeples. Then each other player will then follow that movement, performing the movement with one of their meeples. You can move by foot, which means moving a meeple to an adjacent card, whether that's orthogonally or diagonally. Or by horse, which means you can move your meeple anywhere horizontally along the board, so you can go all the way back and forth across the road anywhere you want. And then there is by raft, where you can move your meeple up and down vertically around the board. Or you can move by griffin, which allows you to move your meeple anywhere diagonally across the board. And then there is by ship, which allows you to move your meeple from a coastal region to any other coastal region around the outside of the board. After a movement card has been chosen and everyone has followed it, you do this 4 times, going around the table with each player, and then you move on to the night phase. There are 2 different types of quests in Tiny Epic Quest, one of which are movement quests, which require you to set up your units in different positions on the board to claim them. This quest, Defend the Inland Region, means that you have to have all 3 of your characters in the inner areas of the board, not connected to a coast. And if you do so, you get the reward of being able to automatically slay one of the goblins. On your turn, whenever you complete a movement quest, you may automatically take that card and gain its rewards, but you can only complete 1 quest during a given turn. There are also tempo quests, which require you to be the first to complete a temple and then take the rest action during the night phase. So to complete a temple, you'll be rolling dice during the pressure luck portion of the night phase, trying to get the correct symbols to be able to complete through the temple. The first player to get to the last space and then rest, ending their night phase, will be able to take the treasure and add it to their meeple. These different treasures can add all sorts of different abilities to your different meeples. There are all sorts of different treasure cards, so you can gain all sorts of different powers on your different characters that you try to utilize during the game. The temples come in 2 different types, some that require maps to complete and others that require torches. Another way to get in-game points and unlock new abilities and items is by getting your legendary items. To get these, you have to complete the temples in a certain order. So to unlock your sword, you first have to do the forest temple and then the water temple, and then you'll be able to equip your sword, which will make it easier to slay goblins. There are also obelisks around the map, which you use these locations to try to upgrade your spell power. This will help with in-game scoring and raise your minimum power level. To unlock the spellbooks, you have to be standing on the correct obelisk, like say you wanted to go for the S spell, and then stand there long enough for people to roll dice. Each time someone rolls a mushroom, you'll raise the magic track, and as the magic track raises, the night phase will become more dangerous. So to complete the mushroom, you have to be at least in the 1 area on the thing to have 1 fairy to unlock that spellbook. So then you could complete the S. If you're going for the scorpion one, you would have to be in the 2 range, which are going to make goblins do 2 damage instead of 1, and you have to press your luck longer staying in there to be able to unlock the higher level spells. There are also goblins around the board on portals. You can go to these locations and attempt to fight the goblins during the night phase. To defeat them, each time a player rolls a punch symbol, you'll be able to deal 1 damage. You have to be able to deal a total of 6 damage to them during the night phase to be able to claim the goblin, and that will raise your max hit points by 1 and count for victory points at the end of the game. There are also grottos around the board. When you move your meeples to these locations, you'll be able to one-time activate a special ability. These can do anything from advancing your heroes on temple tracks to moving your other heroes around the board, or gaining extra power or health depending on which locations you go to. Now let's talk about the night phase. This is the press your luck part of the game. Each player will take turns rolling the dice and activating the different abilities, but all other players can follow many of the abilities that you activate. The first thing you do after you roll, if you roll any goblin faces, you have to take that as damage. If you roll multiple goblin faces, the extra goblin faces will go clockwise around the circle, and those players will have to take the damage. So the damage that the goblins do can be spread around to other players on your turn if you roll multiples. When you take damage, you have to take it in hearts, or you can spend 2 power to negate the damage itself. If you ever run completely out of hearts, then you move all of your units back to your castle, and you don't get to complete any of the things you would have completed if you would have rested. Whenever you roll power, you get to gain 1 of the power, and these rotate around the board just like the goblins. If you roll multiple power, the player to your left would get to gain the other power, and then so on and so forth. So if you roll 3, you gain 1, the player to your left gains 1, and the player to their left gains 1. Whenever any player rolls maps, torches, or punches, any other player may utilize those to move their guys in temples or be able to help them fight off the goblins. So you can follow any of those dice rolls whenever they're rolled by any player. Each time a player rolls a mushroom, you move the magic track up. As the magic track increases, it'll be more and more difficult to stay without resting because you'll begin to take more damage. Once you get to the second level on the magic track, then goblins start to do 2 damage and you can no longer gain power. If you get to the third level, goblins now deal 3 damage, you can no longer gain power, and magic also does 1 damage. So the longer you press your luck, the more dangerous the night phase becomes. Players continue rolling dice around the table, trying to defeat goblins, complete temples, and push the magic track up to be able to complete their different spell books. It's always a press your luck, trying to figure out when you should rest and how far you should push to try to complete all of your objectives. But the longer you stay in, the more damage you might take, and if you end up dying, everything becomes reset. So you have to try to make sure to rest in time without pushing too far. After all players have rested during the night phase, they will return any of their meeples that are on temples they have completed, obelisks, or portals to their castle. For each one they return, they can gain 1 health or power. And then any guys that are left on grottos stay there, as well as people in the middle of completing temples. Then you will move the round marker up by 1 and start a new round with movement. If a player did not complete a quest that round, you will discard the last quest on the end of the row and put in a new quest for the players to try to complete. Also, any goblins that are not defeated are flipped over to their enraged side. If you try to move through a tile with an enraged goblin on it, you must pay 1 power, but you are allowed to stop on that tile for free. Play continues until all 5 phases have been completed. Then players score based on the number of spells they've unlocked, quests they've completed, goblins they've defeated, and legendary items they have unlocked. The player with the highest score is declared the winner. Tiny Epic Quest is a game of questing and adventure as you're trying to move your guys around the board to set up completing different movement quests and unlock different items in different temples and figure out how to utilize those to become victorious in this fantasy world.
Awesome. So what do we think of Tiny Epic Quest?
Well, previously I have to say that Galaxies was my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
This is very close, if at least not on par.
Yeah.
And it is just phenomenal. And if you were like a Zelda fan, you should definitely get the vibe for this game. It definitely has that old school, Nintendo game playing in like a flat screen where you're doing quests, diving into dungeons or temples in this case. It really helps bring that back to the game room.
Yeah, the aesthetics for this is like all Zelda and like amazing looking. I love the little item meeples and stuff is great, and getting the cool little upgrades for your characters with the items and trying to figure out how to best utilize those. Yeah. And there's a lot of replayability in that as well, because you're only going to get a few of those items each game, but it's exciting to like play the game again and see what different items come out as you're playing and trying to dive into those temples. it doesn't feel like Zelda like in a box or anything like that, but it's very much like an overworld, like trying to figure out how to set up and complete the quests you want and do the different things around the board, but it has that flavor that makes it like really exciting and cool.
And again, back to those meeples. Oh my gosh, why did nobody do this before? You're actually holding the swords, you're holding the armor or the shield, and it works so well, and it really the table presence is so cool, right? And I also like that the world has two sides. You have this gloom side, and you have the day side, or light side, whatever. And it really changes the game up. The world changes, so how you play the temples are harder. All the mushroom grottos are a little different. It's just really neat how it works.
So you get a lot more playability because there's going to be things are going to be in different areas. I also love that there's several different ways to victory in this game. Really, like
Absolutely.
you can decide to fight off orcs, like get your sword and be better at fighting off orcs and get a bunch of points that way. Or you can try to like focus on getting maybe some of the spell items and get your wand and try to do a bunch of spells. Or you can just try to like get to the temples and get on the items and get lots of quests and things like that. So there's several different ways to really like focus on this game. But you can also try to do all around everything. It's not really like, I wouldn't call it a sandbox game, but it gives you a little bit of that feel because you can do whatever you want.
You're feeding off of everybody's rolls as well, so it's not just you rolling for yourself. If you do damage, it passes along the table, so everybody is feeling the pain.
Right, but you're not locked into like one thing and anything like that. So it's really exciting to just be able to be like, okay, well, I'm going to go here this time, and oh my goodness, he's going over there. Well, I'm going to go over here instead. Or you can be like, oh man, I'm going to try to mess him up and go over here. So there's all sorts of exciting things, and it's interesting how the interaction works with the whole press your luck mechanic during the nighttime.
That's one thing I really like.
Man, it's really intense sometimes when you're like, man, I really need to finish up that temple, but if I roll like another goblin, then I'm gonna like lose my last life, but I really need to get to this point, or else this guy's not gonna be able to do what I want him to do.
And I think the biggest thing for that push your luck is when that magic track moves into its third stage or even second stage, because oh my gosh, you start taking way more damage from the guys, and you can't gain power when the magic track is maxed out. Right?
For sure. And I feel like it might be a little bit overwhelming, like looking at everything on the board at the beginning. But once you understand like what the mechanics of the game and what's going on, it just
really flows.
It just feels beautiful, like everything's sitting out on there.
And it might feel, when you first look at the manual, it might feel to you like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of setup. You might feel like, wow, there's all these fiddly bits potentially. But no. But after you get into the game, even by your second game, you're going to be like, oh, okay, this all makes a lot of sense. And the gameplay flows really well. I'm really happy with how that works.
I like a lot of the Tiny Epic games. Like, I'm a fan of different ones. I like some more than others, but as far as everything goes, I really liked Tiny Epic Kingdoms, but Tiny Epic Quest, after the games that we've played, is now my new favorite Tiny Epic game.
I can see that.
And I still like a lot of them, but just this one, just the ability to just run around and do what you want and be able to, like, all the way the things look, and just the aesthetics of it make it my current favorite.
That's tough for me because I've loved Galaxy so much.
And Galaxy is such a good game.
It's such a game, but you're right. This one is definitely edging it because there's so much you can do. And again, with like a Tiny Epic game, there's tons of game in this box. And I've played with all the player counts now. And even I'm not a solo gamer, but even the solo game was really fun.
I haven't tried the solo game out yet, but that would definitely be interesting to try.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And after playing all the player counts, I think I prefer it with 4.
Nice, because you have a lot of pressure and racing for other things.
I think that's my favorite way to play.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So if you're into a interesting game where you're trying to set up to complete all these different quests and run around and press your luck mechanics, all sorts of stuff, definitely make sure to check out Tiny Epic Quest.
And beyond that, the artwork is amazing, right? Just phenomenal.
It's great.
So, yeah, absolutely.
So, Tiny Epic Quest. Until next time.
Remember, folks, we'll see you at the table.
So much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.